My name is Bridget Grogan, and I am the academic project manager for the Journalism College, and I am also the graduate coordinator for the ProMasters program. I think one of the greater problems that we're seeing with fake news or poor reporting or advocacy journalism or people feeding stories to the media that aren't true, the greatest negative consequence of that, or one of them, is that we see a lot of, we see greater polarization within the political parties. And everybody always says, oh my gosh, it's worse than it's ever been. It's always been bad. You know, it really has always been bad. I mean, the country to some degree has always been politically polarized. That's not unexpected, I don't think. But I do think recently we've seen more of that, and we've seen greater extremes on both sides. The problem is politics, really. You know, that seems to be the heart of a lot of the problem when it comes to poor reporting, fake news, if you want to call it that. I think we need candidates who are willing to go beyond the rhetoric of their party's platforms and get beyond the rhetoric of demonizing the other party, because most politicians spend so much time demonizing the other side that nobody's really getting anything done. And they're not getting work accomplished in any really healthy ways. So we need people who are willing to have conversations that break through that wall. And, let's sit down and really talk about things like immigration. What are the laws? How should they work? What do we need to do to help people? But what do we need to do in their own countries to help them? We don't talk about that. We don't talk about the issue. We don't ask the question, why are immigrants coming to the United States? Because the situation, the conditions where they come from are so poor. We don't talk about that. We talk about why we should let them in or why we shouldn't let them in, and what that means if you think one way or the other regarding that issue. But what about fixing the problem, right? And that's what we're not seeing happen. So I think the fix is everybody really has to get over themselves, get over their political bent, and really start having conversations and be willing to listen to other points of view. And maybe I won't always understand or agree with your perception, but I can at least try. And then maybe we could talk about the root causes rather than the hot button issues. A lot of people really focus on pulling in readers and eyeballs by, the wildest headlines and the most contentious stories. But has anybody ever really written about any of these problems from the standpoint that you're asking about? I'm not sure they have. So what if somebody tried it? It sure as heck would be brand new, wouldn't it? And you might pick up a lot of readership and a lot of following, social media following, just based on the fact that you're looking at the world from a problem-solving lens, or through a problem-solving lens, rather than having anything to do with any political ideology or the words that we use, the demonizing terms that we use around the parties. What if you eliminated all of that and just talked about the problems? There are people who do, there are people who try. Is it lucrative? I'm not sure, but I would hope that there's plenty of room to have those conversations. On the journalism side, I think one of the things that journalists need to do a better job of, and I see this on both sides, aside from the talk shows and aside from Fox News and MSNBC, and we know that there's an ideology there associated with those, with those networks. But aside from that, journalists can be biased, even at a more local level. And I read that in stories. And I think some of the words that some journalists use are not fair words necessarily. And so journalists, I think, need to be more responsible for not pushing an agenda, even on a very hidden level, And I think consumers need to really drop bombs on the journalists who do that and say, I'm not going to listen, I'm not going to read. Now they do, and I think to some degree that's why we have Fox News and MSNBC, because you have people who are going to just instinctively, naturally gravitate to one side or the other. So I don't know how we really stop it if journalists choose to do that, unless everybody says, hey, no more of this political polarization, just stop, both sides stop. So that means that the entire country would have to stand up and say, enough is enough. We don't want to hear it anymore. Let's solve the problems.